Hello. Uh, this is a response to somebody who talked to me in r/Deltarune discussions, and I thought I'd talk about their response to me because since it seemed like they had a lot of questions about it. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a better way to record, so this is the best recording I have. I actually had to take a screenshot of the whole page and then move it here since for some reason my computer wasn't letting me record on that web page, so instead I have to do it like this on a what do you call it? What do you call this program? Paint. And here it is. The Gaster followers might be darkeners, which wasn't quite what I was saying. The roaring may have already happened. Darkness was how Gaster saved the underground, and more. A response to user Devlin SCP-618. That's my account. That's me, because I like SCP and I like Gravity Falls, which is where 618 comes from. My other post got a response, what an honor, so I decided to make a response to that response, which is responseception, I suppose. My original post is here and my blah blah blah. Also, for the sake of transparency, I wanted to point out that I can't include every single line of the original response here. I'm not cherry picking stuff out of context. I still read the whole thing carefully and include enough of the writing that we can follow their logic. I don't like he, but yeah. The post would have been way too long if I didn't do so, so make sure to check the original post for full context. That is true. There was a lot of text there, and because my text was in response to his, which you need full context for, it was a lot. It was just a lot, which is fine. I love writing and reading. Oh, and also, if I disagree with you at parts, please don't take it personally. I love discussing lore, and this was a lot of fun, and you also had a lot of really cool points. Thank you so much for taking the time to read my theory and annotate it. I think I'll annotate this post as I go through it, so I can see what I think. So it will be like a live feed of my reaction. I'll also hope the camping is going well. My camping did go very well. It was a very enjoyable experience. Expensive because, well, my place I went to was a little expensive and it was like 5 hours away from my home. There was no internet at the campground. We actually had to drive outwards to a city in order to get. It was very fun though, very fun. I disagree with this, not because your analysis didn't make sense, but because I think the premise behind it doesn't make sense. Okay, that's a fair reason. I realize that not everyone is going to agree with my initial assumptions, and I'd like to see alternative reasonings. The point of that is, I disagree with the basis behind your theory, because I just don't see why Gaster would go around doing this, because I mean, in Undertale we have Gaster followers, which I don't know if they actually are his followers, but if they are, why wouldn't he just go to them? Why would he have to drive people crazy? Maybe it's the Deltarune version of Gaster, because I think that there's two different versions of Gaster, an Undertale one and a Deltarune one, because of the audio another hymn, which implies there's two different hymns. Him being probably Gaster. So maybe Jebel and Spamton were just yet to be Gaster followers or something. But then why would they be crazy? Because the Gaster followers we see in Undertale. Hi, Kyra. Oh, my dog's here. Oh, she's a sweet baby. Oh, I'll be petting her. The Gaster followers in Undertale were pretty reason-minded, and they were often cryptic, which I don't think Jevil and Spamton have the capability to do, since they're so insane and out there, you know? So I just don't see him going around and recruiting people who aren't sort of already in on what he knows. It wouldn't it be better to target people who already sort of know what you want, but who are immediately loyal, like will follow you to the grave, and tell them about your insane knowledge instead of giving it to any random person, which, I mean, I get your point, but he wasn't just going to any random person. He's more or less testing the waters. But I don't know. I just don't like it. This is one person who made both Jevil and Spamton go insane by giving them knowledge, and that person is Gaster. Gaster is a great scientist, knows that Deltarune is a game and/or simulation, and has some measure of control over it. See, again, that's another thing. I don't know that Gaster necessarily knows that he's in a video game, per se, but he does know some kind of forbidden knowledge that we're not supposed to know about. You know? Like, in a way, knowing that monsters can use human souls to become extremely powerful, that could be kind of forbidden knowledge. That's actually why the humans killed all of the monsters and drove them underground back in Undertale, is because they learned this. I don't know how they learned this, since there's a supposedly never an instance of it, but I guess they knew about it somehow. Gaster, maybe he knows about Dark Worlds and he knows some other kind of forbidden knowledge. It isn't necessarily fourth wall breaking is what I'm saying. I'm saying it could be like Cthulhu, where you look at it and it goes mad, but it doesn't have to necessarily be, oh, I'm actually a fictional character, because a lot of times fictional characters, I mean, realistically, what would you do if you found out you were in a piece of fiction? Sorry, my computer screen turned off for just a second there and it stopped the recording. I'll have to get back into it. Now, yeah, that's my main point. And Gaster is not the knight, but he did give the secret bosses the shadow crystals, or giving them his knowledge creates one. Something along those lines. I get the idea, though. Gaster told his knowledge to Jevil before he told Spamton. Specific timing isn't important. I don't necessarily know if I would agree with that. Like, let's say what you're talking about is true, and that Gaster did do this. We don't know the specifics because it happened in the vague past. So it could have been in order of Spamton and then Jevil, because they did come from completely different worlds. However, Jevil has been locked up, but Spamton has already went through his arc and been thrown out of Queen's Castle, so I don't know. They're both kind of, in general, I don't think the timing really matters that much. For reference to anyone reading, these were my initial assumptions, the things I didn't bother to try and prove for the sake of my theory. I get it. Every theory has to go on a basis in order to be explained, because that's... I wonder if you disagree with some of this or all of it. I don't disagree with all of it. I just disagree with, like, some of it, or, like, the theme of it, you know? I know all of it is debatable or likely makes sense, I guess. At best, coming back to this later. What is it? Where did I just come from? Oh no, where did I go? Where am I? Things that some of those. I know all of it is debatable or likely makes sense, I guess, at best. Coming back to this later, it seems the assumption you disagreed with was Gaster wants to be remembered. That's not really what I disagree with. That was just kind of an observation I made, which is that Gaster followers are afraid of talking about him. There's a whole theme in Undertale and Deltarune about memory and remembering things or not remembering things. And for some reason, Gaster isn't remembered by anyone except for Goners. Like, or at least Gaster followers. Technically, I don't know if Goner Kid knows about it, so mainly just Gaster followers. I don't even know if Clam Girl knows about it. She hasn't stated his name, but it seems like only Goners know about him and nobody else does. Or if they do, they remember him only vaguely as, oh, the royal scientist who came before Alphys, but they don't actually talk about him. They just say before Alphys. So it seems like everyone has kind of forgotten about him, and if Flowey's assumption that when you die enough times, people start to forget you is true, that means that Gaster somehow died a lot. Like, a lot. Like, Gaster had to have died an enormous number of times in order for people to forget about him to this degree if Flowey's assumption, or Azrael's assumption that the more you die, the more people forget you is true. So I'm not saying that that was where I disagreed. What I disagreed with was just generally the premise of like him going around finding random people and turning them insane. Because, well, for Spampton I get, because he was just a random nobody. He was just an average Addison. Jevil was not. Jevil was the court jester, and if you know anything about medieval politics, which you probably don't, or maybe not. A lot of people just don't know about medieval politics, but jesters had it really good. It was like if you were a court jester back in the medieval period, you had things nice. You had influence over the king. Even if things went sour, you're just a silly guy, you know. It was pretty good to be a jester, and you had a lot of influence, weirdly. So I don't know. Well, these are two very different stances. One is a very, I won't say very powerful or influential person, because he could have just talked directly to the king, but he didn't. And the other was just a random guy he found off the street and turned into a big shot before he turned into a nobody. Let's see here. It looks more like Gaster. Reference anyone who come there. Looks more like Gaster discovered something, his dark fountain. But with goners, it's more like they've been there for a long time. That's what I'm talking about, because like Clam Girl, she knows about Susie and tells you about Susie. And while it's a different spelling, so you could say it's about Undertale, the Undertale's version of Susie, Susie also mentions Arousey's name pronounced or spelled differently than normal. So it could be based on what you hear. In other words, you pronounce it the way you hear it in the game. And that's how you get at these misconceptions, like it's Suzy instead of Susie, for example. I hope I edit that. I hope I edit that out. I have a clogged throat. Clam Girl from the Switch version of Undertale says that you'll meet Susie soon, but it's not just Clam Girl. It sounds like Gasterfullers have been around for a long time. Like a Goner Kid, he talks about thinking about a whole world where it's exactly the same except you were not there. But it doesn't sound related to Gaster. It doesn't sound like it happened recently. He's just kind of thinking about it. But everybody, they always kind of talk about the fondness of the past, even when we're talking about Gaster. With Gaster, it definitely seems like an event that happened, whereas with the Goners, it just seemed like they're kind of there, like some kind of old statues. I don't know, it's just a weird feeling I have. I don't have a ton of evidence to prove it outside of Clam Girl, but it makes sense that Gaster discovered the Dark Fountain, but how could he discover it unless it was made? It's mentioned that Gaster fell into his own creation, and entry number 17 talks about darkness, and Queen explains that determination is needed to make a Dark Fountain. If you agree that Gaster made the DT extractor, actually wait, did he? Alphys claims to have named determination, even though other people know the world. Or know the work? Other people know the work. I think he means like the blueprints to the determination extractor. But why is the extractor skull-shaped? That I actually do have a theory about. There's two possible candidates. With Azrael has a very skull-shaped, what was it called? Hyper Goner Blaster? It was that big-ass face that came and destroyed all the timelines in the Azrael fight. And that was skull-shaped, but not only was it skull-shaped, it also had horns, it had sharp teeth, and it did look kind of like the determination extractor. But why would Azrael's attack look kind of like the determination extractor? Well, weirdly, this is a piece of Undertale lore which nobody ever talks about. Dragons. In Temmie's room, Temmie says that she was the ancestor of dragons, or road dragons, or something like that. And in the art book for Undertale, there is supposed to be a wall scene covering the history of the underground in Waterfall, but it went unused because it was just kind of a prototype. It had the picture of a Deltarune with a snake on one side battling a dragon or some kind of weird beast-looking thing with three people near the Deltarune, except the Deltarune was just like an angel with a heart near it. It wasn't like the Deltarune that we know. In fact, the Deltarune that we know was kind of plastered over stars. I highly recommend looking into the art book for Undertale because it has a ton of unused content that, even though it isn't canon, brings up a lot of questions, including dragons, which apparently was originally a part of like the old tablets in Waterfall area explaining the history, but then it just was never used. But that related back to the Deltarune because Deltarune was centered right around that area. So I think that the skull theme has something to do with dragons, but I have no clue. Honestly, I might be reaching here. I'm just going off of what I've seen, and what I've seen is skull-shaped determination extractor, skull-shaped Azrael attack that wipes out timelines, skull-shaped dragon heads in Temmie's room. It just kind of like that's a weird coincidence. And let's see, what else? Sensei discovered its own creation. It claims to have determination, though other people know the dark one. Why is it skull shape? Maybe I'll try and sort this out later. Either way, I think Gaster made a dark fountain somehow and fell into it. Perhaps the Gaster followers are darkness from Deltarune, which gave them Deltarune knowledge. This would also explain why they knew about Gaster and followed him. Well, darkness from Deltarune. Well, I don't agree with that, because the darkness so far that we've seen in Deltarune are always object-themed in some way, but the Goners that we see in Undertale, if that were true, if they did come from Deltarune, they look like the townspeople in the light world. You know, you have Clam Girl, you have that one guy who's bent over looking at a donut, and I guess he just loves donuts. And yeah, there was that one bald orange guy who's straight at the screen. They look like the monster townfolk in the light world, so I don't know where this Darkner thing would come from. I guess I do have a theory that actually would make that sense. And I'm going to share it right now because I just love sharing theories so much. I made a theory a long time ago about the core and its purpose. I theorized that somehow Gaster found out about the Dark World and he used the Dark World to power the underground, because that's what we hear in lore. We hear Alfie say that the core is the source of all of the power in the underground. It's the entire power grid, all the way from the beginning of the game, running Snowdin Town, and I think maybe even the ruins. I'm not sure if it's hooked up to the ruins or not. No, it wouldn't. No, it probably would, because there are traps in the. Either way. So my point is that the core runs its energy all throughout the underground, right? But if it's powered off of darkness, how is it powered off of darkness? Well, Alfie says that it's, quote, it runs off of geothermal magic energy. In other words, it is using magic, which is geothermal, which tells me that there's magic in the ground, and this just sounds like darkness because you have to puncture a hole into the ground in order to get darkness out, which tells me that Gaster, when he made the core, is somehow using darkness to generate power for the underground. Now, what effect might this have? Well, I see it as darkness infects things and makes things more Dark World-like. You know? It takes inanimate objects and makes them alive, and we actually do see that in Undertale. In the snowman was alive. The rocks in the ruins were alive, like that rock that thinks that you're real pushy for wanting to stay on the trigger. And we see all of this crazy stuff, like living things that just should not be living things by all rights. But also, monsters can use magic. But why is this? Why can monsters use magic? Well, I think that the darkness, which Gaster in Undertale released using the core to power the underground, may have seeped into the various parts of the underground, and that's what gives it its various dark world properties, like turning to dust. Because if someone is more dark world like, but they don't have a light world object counterpart because they're just a human person, or not a human person, but the monster person, then it's possible that they just turn to dust since there is no physical thing that they can turn into. Like how Rousey turns into like a scarf when he gets down, stuff like that. So, and that would explain why they can use magic in Undertale, but not Deltarune. I've told this to a few other people, and nobody has ever read it because it's so long to read. And then once you do read it, it sounds a little bit like a crackpot theory, but it does actually make a ton of sense when you think about it, because it just explains everything, more or less. Another thing I always thought about was like the sorcerers that the humans used to trap the monsters underground. Like if human spellcasters casted the barrier which keeps them trapped underground, that means that humans could use magic, and that's pretty crazy to think about. That humans could use magic too in Undertale, or they could, but how? That's a good question. Let's see. Makes sense that Gaster discovered. Yeah, why the skull shaped sorts of out there. Just gave him alternate knowledge. This would also explain why they knew about Gaster and followed him, as supposedly Darkners are meant to follow and assist Lightners. Now again, this is my point. It is possible that the Goners could be possible kind of Darkners because darkness infects things. So maybe the prolonged period of time could actually turn a Lightner into a pseudo-Darkner. That could be possible, but I don't know if Goners could also be doing all of that at once. The obvious plot hole here is why they aren't objects, but maybe Toby hadn't decided on that plot point yet. Yeah, that's what I talked about a minute ago. I probably should have read a little bit more. Like how Clam Girl mentioned Susie when her name's turned out to be Susie. Again, Susie has mispronounced or has spoken Rousey's name out loud, but spelled differently from how we see it in game, which tells me it might be that might be a misspelling or a misprint on Toby's part. But since he puts a ton of attention into detail, it might be because he just thinks that Susie hears Rousey's name being said Rousey instead of Rousey, which is why it's said differently. So it's possible that Clam Girl also said Susie instead of like Susai or Susie, you know? Could be wrong. I think we can be lenient on a years in advance foreshadowing event. That is true. We can be absolutely give him that. I mean, he didn't plan out every tiny thing years in advance. Probably planned out a big part of the story, but not everything. Yeah. Each Gaster follower talks about Gaster, but don't actually, like, work for him. Again, this is true, because we don't even know Gaster's motive, let alone if the Gaster followers are like following him in that way. Never gave an indication of that. In fact, Goner Kid was even just a kid. That's a good point. You can't exactly be a follower if you're just a little kid. Yo, you're a question mark too, right? Have you ever thought about a world where everything is exactly the same, except you don't exist? Everything functions perfectly without you. The thought terrifies me. You know, that does make me feel a little better about this. Thank you. Please forget about me. Please don't think about this anymore. Gonna Kid's dialogue raises so many questions. Like, what is a question mark, and why does he think we're a question mark like him too? I think, don't get me wrong, I haven't read this quite as well yet, but I think that he's going to say in a minute that question mark means Darkner. But when I think about the series of question marks, I think of like Jevel's room and how his room is called a long string of question marks, and like how the area at the beginning of the game, all that whole area is called question marks, and all of the Not no wait, they're called wobbly things. Either way, you get my point. Like question mark seems to be about mysteriousness or some kind of our unknown thing or something we're not supposed to know very well or something really important. So I don't know if it's necessarily darkness. Well, it could be darkner, foreshadowing in advance. I think that Toby could have made it a little bit different because why would we not be able to understand it? It may have been just like that sound, like some kind of glitchy sound, like and there'd be no way for Frisk or the player to interpret a weird sound as a name or a name of an object. So maybe that's why it's called question mark, because we can't identify literally what he said, like we actually cannot interpret it. And it's not just like a censored word, which we're not supposed to know, I think. I haven't read yet. Let's see. If I continue my train of thought, this could indicate that question mark is darkner. Okay, I was pretty spot on that. Hell, maybe Toby himself didn't know he'd be calling it darkner yet. And thought this would be a good solution. This has the issue of not recognizing a human as a lightener, but again, maybe Toby didn't think that far, or like you said, Goner Kid is just scared and confused. Let's see. I don't know if Goner Kid was confused. It sounded more like he was just feeling existential dread. Like what? Imagine a world where I didn't exist. I don't know. Gaster fell into a dark world and got shattered across time and space, right? Not necessarily, but I'd say it's very, very, very likely, so I'm completely fine with that assumption. Why do you want to unleash the roaring so much? And all so that's just filler. And all the lighteners will be lost in eternal chaos. Doesn't Gaster being shattered across time and space sound pretty much like eternal chaos? I mean, it does kind of sound like eternal chaos to me, because it doesn't sound like he's dying, it just sounds like he's perpetually in a state of past, present, and future, and all across all space. That'd be, I mean, have you ever looked into like a fractal pattern? That sounds pretty chaotic. Gonna be honest, not necessarily. Yeah, it's also fair. Chaos for him, certainly, but the world at large seems unaffected. I mean, just go back to Goner Kid's dialogue. But that's, let me think about this train of thought a little better. Not necessarily. I guess it fell into a dark room, got shattered across. No, wait, the roaring is talking about eternal chaos. So, alright. I'll leave that be because I need to think about that more later, I guess. But the world at large seems unaffected. I mean, just go back to Goner Kid's dialogue. Have you ever thought about a world where everything is exactly the same, except you don't exist? Everything functions perfectly without you. One of the main premises of my last hinges on that exact point. Gaster isn't necessary to the story of Undertale. Whoa. Like, at all. You rarely see him, or might not see him at all. A mystery man is a part of Gaster. I believe her. I'm a mystery man is a part of Gaster, believer, but hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! So I guess your premise is that the Deltarune roaring happened before and shattered Gaster. I mean, kind of. Darkness is a little bit weird. I propose later that the reason he got shattered is because he jumped directly into a fountain inside of the dark world, not just into a dark world. And that could have shattered him. Kind of like how if enough fountains appear, it covers land and saturates it with too much darkness, and that causes that causes the roaring. The roaring is just like the inside of a dark fountain, but in the light world. So maybe he just jumped straight into the source. That was kind of like what I was thinking when I said that. Sans is the man from the other world. and gave up on trying to go back a long time ago. That, I think, is pretty fair. I mean, Sans knows all kinds of weird stuff. He has, like, science books. He knows about other worlds, and he has readings or has, like, some kind of scanner to keep track of timelines and shit. I would not put it past him to be a man from the other world, but also, he just kind of appeared out of nowhere. Like, even Gaster has a history to some extent. You know, he was the old royal scientist before Alphys, but Sans and Papyrus, they just spawned into existence. They just spawned like a game character. A little ironic, but so I think Sans being the man from the other world is pretty fair. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a huge fan of that idea. Him having a picture that reads "Don't forget," a kid who doesn't actually exist, asks you to forget him. The machine in Sans basement is broken. You've seen the happiest ending, and they still couldn't fix the machine. Also, I'd just like to say in the art book, which I learned about recently, Toby added a line from somebody that we've never heard of, some name that we've never heard of, that says, "I like those worms. Don't forget." Or don't forget those worms. I like those worms. Which sounds kind of like Rule's card, and it was underneath a picture of him when he was thinking about, or when he added the worms and chains to the vines. I think I'm getting this right, or skeleton, or no, it was dragon skeleton in the Omega Flowey fight. Right under there, there's a line about "Don't forget those worms." So that's pretty eerie too. I didn't include that in the original post because I hadn't seen it yet, but I just found out about that recently. That very same kid saying that you offering him an umbrella when it isn't raining makes him feel better. It's raining somewhere else. Plus, Toby Fox has released images of it raining in Deltarune's Light World. The roaring is inevitable. Uh, that's the roaring is inevitable. I said that because it's the best possible conclusion I can come up with to make all of this make sense. There could be something else, but I only have 2 chapters out of 7 or maybe 9, depending on how you look at it. I would say that the roaring is the absolute best option to explain all of that, which is why I say the roaring is inevitable, because it's the best candidate for that. Otherwise, I can't think of anything. Deltarune is completely wiped out. Sans escapes with the machine in his basement somehow, likely with Papyrus, because Papyrus said that he came from someplace with green grass. Although, that's also up for debate because he acts like he has never seen the sun before. That's a little weird. You know, he hasn't seen the sun, but he has touched grass. Never thought Papyrus would have touched grass, but out of everyone in the underground, Papyrus was the one to touch grass. Wow. So I throw that one out there. Alright, I've seen this path of theory before, so I get where we're going now. So to take this one at a time before we dive into the effects of the roaring, the Sans stuff is neat. I personally do think that Sans Deltarune equals Sans Undertale. Even though I think the man from the other world is Gaster traveling between realities, him being Sans is a good interpretation too, and I have no complaints there. So you're a Gaster equal Sans kind of guy too, huh? I can respect that. I can respect that. I used to think that a long time ago, and I actually do still think that, but it's not the only one. But I do like that idea too, that Sans is just also Gaster, at least kind of in a way, because otherwise, if Gaster disappeared without a trace, then how is Sans there? Maybe it's Sans Deltarune and Sans Undertale. Actual Sans Undertale was just Gaster, but because he's dead or shattered or whatever, that's why we don't see him. That could explain it. However, Sans' dialogue about whether or not he met Chris, playing off of the player's interactions, makes me think it's either happening in a weird simultaneous time and space way. Has anyone ever considered that? Maybe Sans from Undertale goes back to Deltarune universe when he's not on screen in Undertale. That has happened. That has been theorized. People have thought about that before. I can't tell if that's the worst theory ever, or I'm actually cooking. or in a cyclical way. This would explain why Deltarune isn't a prequel or a sequel, but both and none at the same time. But I'm getting off track and we're rereading this. I'm confused. Why did I thought this made sense? Uh, I think that people have theorized this before, and they theorized, oh, maybe the when Sans dies at the end, he doesn't really die, but the blood we see is ketchup, and really he's fleeing from Undertale to Deltarune because he knows he can't win against you. I have seen this theory before. I don't know if I like that idea. Actually, no, I don't like that idea because otherwise, why wouldn't he have just went there? You know, he can't go back home. So if he can't go back home, then why didn't he go there already? The oh, and also what was I thinking about just now? Either happening and simultaneously. Yeah, I think that uh, Deltarune and Undertale are separate worlds, so they're not part of one continuous story, even if they might have some interacting elements like Sans or Gaster or something like that. Ultimately, they're two completely different stories, so it makes sense that they're neither a sequel nor a prequel. Although I think that Sans-wise, following his specific timeline in all of this, not looking at the stories, it could make sense that Sans either knows that you have seen him, but that would mean that he knew that Chris is possessed and is just fucking with everybody. So maybe that's a part of his nihilism, but I don't think that's the case. I think that Sans and Deltarune just straight up has never met Chris before because Deltarune Sans also just kind of appeared one day and asserted himself, which everybody just kind of glosses over. Like Sans Undertale could be Sans Deltarune, yes, but Sans Deltarune also just kind of appeared one day and asserted himself. I think, if I'm getting this right. I can't remember. Maybe I'm forgetting. But where was I going with this? Oh shit. Wait a second. Okay, let's see. I couldn't remember where I was going with that, but I guess I just kind of rambled into a tangent until I ran out of gas. Now I'm back. The rain motif is interesting. It rains in waterfall, but the main significance of waterfall might be the huge dark chasms. Besides that, or including that, rain seems to tie together a lot of seemingly random stuff. That's true. And the idea that Sans took the machine to Undertale with Papyrus is plausible. The Papyrus Q&A reveals likely saw grass before, which Hometown has plenty of. However, if Deltarune was destroyed, why does Sans want to return? Why was he trying to go back before he gave up? I'm thinking maybe trying to go back may refer to like fixing the problem or something. Because if he's in an adjacent timeline where time isn't actually passing, maybe he could use the time in Deltarune to fix the timeline of Deltarune. Does that make sense? He can't return, not just because he can't fix the machine and can't get back, but maybe he wants to fix Deltarune, but he can't do that either, so he can't return. Like a symbolic, my home isn't there anymore, so I can't go back. Instead of literally, I don't have the means to get back. It could be either one. That is a good question. Gaster uncovered the... Oh no, wait, that's the next one. The idea of rain. I'm going to bring this up again. Rain is a very underrated and huge motif in both Undertale and Deltarune. I have no idea why I've never seen people talk about rain more often, honestly. Waterfall is like a big old lore dump, and it's also so mysterious. It was honestly, Waterfall was my original favorite song in all of Undertale when I first found out about it, and it kind of still is, because Waterfall just feels so nostalgic and old and emotionally impactful, like you're remembering something fantastic, or like you're remembering something. What's a word I'm looking for? It feels deep, you know. There's whole areas of it that aren't lit up where you have to travel in the dark until you light up those glowing mushrooms. Unless you're a speedrunner, in which case you just do it without. Let's see. There's there's all of the dead children items in there too, like the tap dance shoes, the frying pan, and I think there's something else. Gerson lore dumps in there. It's where you see where you first hear a lore dump about the Deltarune in Undertale from Gerson. In fact, Gerson is still there. That's a whole thing. Let's see what else. That has the legendary object, which is just simply never explained. Literally the self-insert of Toby Fox himself just plucks the legendary object out of the game, so we never see what the hell it does. It has all those tablets, which explain the history of the underground. Ancient old tablets, partly decomposing, but you can't quite read at some parts. It has it has Mystery Man in some parts. It has Goner Kid. Overall, Waterfall is a enormously important area, and I don't think it ever gets as much credit as it really deserves. It's a very underrated area. But not only that, it deals with water. It has all kinds of waterfalls, rushing water. It has what's called the Abyss, because Alfie's stared into it or something like that. I can't remember. I remember there was some kind of line of dialogue about the Abyss referring to the really deep waterfall. Like they don't know where the water falls to. They just know that it does. Like something like that. It's implied that Alfie's committed suicide by jumping off there on the genocide route, I think. In Deltarune, we also hear things like the music coming from the sea. It's all I don't know. I'm getting off track. I need to move on. Otherwise, I'll be stuck here. Let's see. Gaster uncovered the deeper mechanics of darkness, or just straight up got trapped in the dark world because Gaster was always an Undertale character. Even the audio Another Hymn indicates that there is an Undertale Gaster and a Deltarune Gaster, not one single Gaster, or any one single Gaster. Oh, excuse me. I already talked about that earlier, so let's see what you say. I assume you also think that Gaster is running the Vessel Maker sequence, which makes sense. He talks just like how we know Gaster to, and the audio file name is really telling. So if there is multiple Gasters, are you saying that before the events of Undertale, Gaster split into Undertale Gaster and Deltarune Gaster? No, I'm not saying that before the events of Undertale, Gaster split into anything. I think that there were just always two versions, like one in Undertale and one in Deltarune, because we think of Gaster as somehow being an anomaly to the story of Undertale, like because he is this mysterious, cryptic, scary character. You know, he may have done Dark Worlds. He definitely did the core. May have done Determination. We feel like he's somehow special or outside of the story, but ultimately he is a character. And because these are two different stories or two different universes, that makes me think that there is just always an Undertale Gaster, just one who is chilling out there, and another one who is always just chilling out in Deltarune, you know, until events happen that paralleled each other because the two games are paralleled of each other. Also, what of the treats that came out before the release of Deltarune and Undertale 2, I think, that replicated the same speech pattern of Entry 17 and the Vessel sequence? Is there a Twitter account, Gaster? Genuinely, I hope this doesn't sound rude, since I don't mean to with that, and a reference to a man who speaks in hands and not men. I feel like it makes more sense for there to just be the one Gaster, and we also see, and also Susie's post spammed in dialogue about hands seems to confirm they are still a Gaster motif, even if we haven't seen the wingdings in font yet. That I don't understand that. I think that the Twitter accounts, the Twitter takeovers aren't canon because Toby said that they aren't canon. However, for Gaster, I don't know if that's true. For Gaster's Twitter takeover, that isn't true, but Flowey also did a takeover. And it was confirmed that the Flowey takeover before Undertale was released, that was explicitly not canon. Like Toby made it very clear that the oh, my voice and lungs are getting tired. That the Flowey takeover was not canon. However, because of the Deltarune release Twitter takeover, the release of survey dot program, or was it survey underscore program, and the legal warning before you install the game is just a cryptic all capital, you accept everything that happens. It's possible that Gaster actually is canonically the one to take over Twitter. Plus, after the Flowey Twitter takeover, how do I put this? There was no indication of it afterwards, but with the Gaster takeover for Deltarune, Toby Fox later afterwards described it like he was blacking out. So he may be trying to make like an in-story or canon reasoning to the Twitter takeover by saying that he was affected in some way, and that we didn't get from a Flowey one. So that's kind of a odd subject. I talked about this with Jaru, but Jaru just kind of shrugged it off. He was very firm that that's not it. He really wanted to say that the Twitter takeovers were not canon at all, but I don't know. I think that the Twitter takeovers are inconsequential to the story because what if you pirated it, you know? I just think that they aren't canon to the story, so you don't have to come up with an Undertale Gaster, a Deltarune Gaster, and that. Oh, and where was I talking about? I got off track. Back here, where was it? Running events of the same events of Hunter 17 events. The man who speaks in hands and not men. That's a bad reasoning because the man who speaks in hands. That's a reference from the Boatman or Boat Person, but the sprite is called Boatman in Undertale. So Undertale character saying "man who speaks in hand" does make more sense than saying "men who speak in hands" because the Boat Person in Undertale wouldn't be talking about something from Deltarune. He'd only be talking about something from Undertale. So it makes sense they'd only say "man" and not "men." I feel like this makes more sense, just be Gaster, and also Susie's Spamton dialogue. Again, Spamton can be at play both in Undertale and Deltarune, but that would be two different Gasters, I think. So I think that you're right about Susie's post or Susie's comment being Gaster related. I'm wearing down fast. It makes sense. My brain is frying. I gotta move on to the next thing. Oh geez. What we know about Undertale's version is that he is omnipresent. Gaster followers claim that he's listening to them talk as they talk to you. Spamton wanted to say something at one point, only to stop himself and apologize to seemingly nobody before screaming, "No, no, stop, help me, help, it burns!" So if there is a Gaster in both Deltarune and Undertale, why doesn't he want to be remembered? And he doesn't want to be remembered. Why? This is where I get my assertion that he doesn't want to be remembered, because if you remember correctly, Goner Kid asked you not to remember him, and he didn't make it seem like he wanted you not to remember for your sake. He just, for some reason, doesn't want to be remembered. Goner Kid did not want to be remembered after he wanted you to forget him. But now Gaster, the Goners, like the Gaster followers, are afraid to talk about him, and they don't want to share too much detail aside from before his accident. And then Spamton tries to say something, but then he fails because he's so scared about it, which makes me feel like somehow these characters know him, but he's threatening them if they let on too much. Again, that's where I get this idea from, because it seems like there's a theme of not remembering. And the memory heads from Undertale, the bad memories, they had Gaster faces or Mystery Man faces as an attack and embedded in some of their sprites. Yes, I hear them, Kyra. I hear them. Don't got a wolf. Oh, jeez. My dog's wolfing at a car. So while my theory is that Gaster is revealing himself, yours is that he's hiding himself. Perhaps he is, however. Note a few things. Gaster followers say that his falling into his creation was an accident. Gaster presumably spoke to us on Twitter. Again, I don't think the Twitters really count because Flowey did one too, and that wasn't canon. But Gaster's is just kind of ambiguous. I think that it might be possible that Gaster from Twitter Takeover was Deltarune Gaster and not Undertale Gaster. I don't know. This has got to end pretty quickly here since people are coming and I have to stop recording when that happens. Deltarune's original file name indicates it is/was a survey program, and Gaster presumably speaks to us, the player, through the Vessel Maker sequence. Those don't strike me as evidence he's hiding himself. Maybe he wants to keep a layer of mystery, but overall he very much wants to involve us. That's the thing, though. He wants to involve us. Like, he creates a survey program. He talks to us directly in the vessel creation. He probably knows that we know more than in-game characters, but he likely wants us to keep that to ourselves, so to speak. I don't know how to phrase it right. But then again, now I'm realizing that those examples are about him connecting with us, the player. Maybe he wants us to know about him, but he doesn't want the characters. But again, I just said that. Yeah, that's true. I agree with you fully. Also, I don't know when to insert this, so I'll mention it now. I once read a theory that Gaster was a human in. Oh, I gotta stop. I'm running out of time.